Hey, what's up? It's Jim, and today I'm going to talk about Roma. Roma is a personal, interesting, nostalgic look at Mexico in the 70s, or really a very wealthy family living in Mexico in the neighborhood referred to Colonia Roma. I think this film is very interesting in how Cuarón, who was obviously is a Mexican filmmaker, made films in Mexico, then came to Hollywood, or kind of came back because Ichimama and all that. This film plays more like a foreign film than a Hollywood film. And not just because it's in another language, because that's like an obvious thing, but because the way most of Cuarón's films work is you follow a protagonist, whether it be Sandra Bullock in Gravity, Clive Owen in Children of Men, or Harry Potter in the third Harry Potter film. You're following them and they're the protagonists and they're your main focus. That's what the story's about in a lot of ways. Roma doesn't do that, and it's very interesting because it's almost felt like kind of such a shift artistically in terms of who he is as an auteur, while also making a grand auteur statement, which might be the grandest auteur statement in to say, I don't really need this auteur theory shit on me, man. I'm gonna do what I'm gonna do. And that's sort of what Roma really is, which I think is insanely impressive, and it shows how much of a filmmaker Alfonso Cuarón is. Because this film is about Cleo, who is the housekeeper, watches after the children, all things like that, in this wealthy house in Mexico. You see things of her life and how she, at the time, is pregnant, and how she has to deal with that and her relationships, which almost feels like it's playing in the background, this drama of what's actually going on within the family, how the father is kind of leaving the family and not really there very much, and you kind of are getting two kind of plot lines at once, but neither is necessarily the focus point. This film is almost all in wide shot. I can't think of many kind of close-ups or anything. There are some mediums, but for the most part it's a lot of wide shots and a lot of long takes, a lot of like logistics. Sometimes with Cuarón, with this and Children of Men, I almost want to read about how they put the shot together as much as I want to watch the movie, because the logistics of which are insanely impressive, and that someone's giving an amazing performance in that kind of shows the prowess and amazingness he is as a filmmaker. That's why if you watch some of the scenes in Children of Men, not many people are going to do an amazing action tracking shot and have the logistics of that, and you know there's a lot of technical acting while at the same time have real emotions. In this, he's doing that again, but he's not doing it with an action sequence. He's not doing it for a big commercial thing, which he's previously had in his last three films. This is more to show a very personal story and kind of put you in that place in 70s Mexico, and he does it insanely well. Like, the craft of this film shows you how great of a filmmaker Cuarón is, if you like didn't already know from those other movies. But because of that craft and because of those wide shots, because the film isn't so focused on the protagonist, it almost feels like you're observing everything that's going on. Like, you are watching her, Cleo, witness all these things and sometimes get her perspective in. But it almost feels like her perspective is not the forefront, and even her own mind, because she's having to worry about this family, the children, the cleaning, the dog shit, all these things that kind of work within her character. Like, there's a narrative. It's not just he did it to show off, like he's seen Fellini movies, and there is a strong Fellini influence in this. This is more of a world cinema thing, and I was honestly shocked because this is not the Cuarón you're used to, which I think is amazing. Like, I've seen other Hollywood filmmakers make a foreign film, but you can kind of be like, oh, it's like that director, but like foreign. And this is like a totally different Cuarón. It reminded me of Jacques Tati in terms of using the entire frame, having things go on, little nuances and background details. This is a film that you can watch more than once and take new things from it. I haven't watched it more than once, but you feel the richness, the kind of rich kind of cinephile rewatchability of a film like Roma, which Tati had as well. I don't think this is comic like Tati. I more mean because of the framing and how he uses the camera reminds me of Jacques Tati. I think Cuarón, what I find interesting also is how there's kind of a knowing of what was going on in the culture at the time, but almost like you're not being updated on it, but that's almost part of the point of Roma, is that these people are living out their lives, and like there's this massive like protest kind of riot scene, but like she's trying to look at a crib, and that's kind of like how life is a lot of the time. I think when you're younger you think, oh, and then I guess nobody could focus on like their work because that was going on, and it's like, no, people have to go to work, people are still having babies, people still are getting dropped off at school, all those things are still happening while all this other stuff is going on in the background, and you might not be directly wrapped up into it, but it's wrapping you up anyway. And that was really an interesting way to contextualize society and societal changes and political changes. This is very much a female story, and all the men in this film are kind of like so into their own stupid shit, which they're kind of ignoring their responsibilities and not being very much there for the women. I think that says more probably about masculinity than this film gets into, in the idea that the dad in this, we don't see very much, but is kind of a looming figure over the entire film, and then the guy who gets Cleo pregnant, they both kind of just are so into their thing and believe in their thing so passionately, but it's like, it's almost like the film is showing like they're missing the life. Like, this film feels like life. Like, there's so many times when after I saw this film, I was like helping Sophie in the morning get ready for my daughter get ready for daycare, and as I was doing that, I kind of thought how like so much of what they were doing in this film are things you do in life. You know, you get your kid a snack, you get them water, you make sure they're dressed, you make sure they're ready to go to school. And it sort of doesn't matter to me what Trump is doing or whoever president there is while you're watching this at that time. It doesn't really matter to getting her to daycare. And in some ways, the real heart of life, especially when you have a family, and this is a film about a family, is making sure that family stays together and making sure everyone is okay. And I think in a lot of ways with the character of Cleo, I felt like for so much of the film she was an observer, and we're seeing things through her. We're seeing all these things about the family, you know, whether it be mostly about the father, but things from the kids, hearing their perspective, hearing the one kid feel like he had past lives. When you're watching the film play out, you kind of feel like she's not a part of that. I almost felt the sadness, like how can she live her life, you know, through them? You know, she almost has given up all of that to be with them. And I think ultimately you find out that she's a part of that family, because you don't see her own family. Like, this is her family. This is her life. This is who she cares about. And there's a sadness in that. And if you're watching that and being like, people shouldn't let their jobs become their life and things like that, and people shouldn't let what many look at as servitude become who they're serving, become their love and support system. But I think she showed through her the pregnancy that was going on through the film, and I think she showed that they were there for her. They didn't discard her. They might boss her around and you might treat your family like shit, but you still love them. And I think there's a certain degree of, maybe I don't agree with like falling into a job to that extent, you know, that you have your personal life and you have your professional life and things. But I think with Roma, I think almost what it's sort of saying with the kind of arc of that and understanding that and kind of understanding the narrative of the film, how she might have felt that way, but then truly understood that she is loved and with them, and she doesn't go back to her family. And maybe, I don't know how her and her family are, we don't really get into that, but I think it's showing like you kind of find your place sort of within what you are being and within who you are loving and who loves you. When I was watching this film, I was thinking about that relationship, thinking about how that relationship gives you so much comfort and the beauty in that. Roma's very wonderful at kind of establishing that, showing the kind of love in that, the belonging of that. And Cuarón said this is a very personal film of his. I'm just, from the little biographical information I really know about him, I'm assuming he was more of one of the kids in this house, but I don't know. And I don't know who necessarily is playing his mother. The two actresses who were nominated for Oscars give really great performances. I particularly liked the actress who played Cleo, Mariana Di Tavira, and then Yatsla Aparico, who played the mother, I thought also did a really great supporting performance and kind of like gave you that kind of powerful mother of the house kind of performance. And even though there's a lot going on and you can certainly get lost within all the various things going on in this film, I'm sure there's little smaller dramas I totally missed, she sticks out so much, and she's important because she is still the matriarch, even if Cleo is doing more of the traditional jobs that you would expect from a matriarch to do. It plays like a film that is made for a big screen, and he's using the full frame in ways that very few filmmakers, very few films try to do it. I think the one thing about this film is I feel like I talked almost more about the technique than the emotions of this film, and I think that's one of the things about Cuarón in general. You're almost more awed by him as a filmmaker than him as a storyteller. And I think in terms of Children of Men, I think I love the story as much as the technique. I think in Harry Potter and Prisoner of Azkaban, I should say, and then with Gravity and Roma, I think I'm almost more captivated by the transitions, his filmmaking and everything like that. I don't know if that's the best way to make a film, because should you be calling to mind the editing? Should you be bringing to attention all these things? These things should be invisible. I think there are many different ways to make a film, and being restrictive like that is not good for art in general. Like, it's a stupid idea to say film should only be this way. You know, that's like saying all film should have an explosion or something like that. Kind of limit limited view of filmmaking, and it's not a really good way to view filmmaking. And so I disagree with that. But I do think with Cuarón and how he directs, you are almost as impressed by him as you are getting into the story. I think the story of this was strong enough, and it is a slow moving film. I've heard a lot of people say they have a hard time getting into it. I think the more surprising thing is you expect a certain thing from Cuarón, you're not getting it up front, so it does take you a little longer to get into. I'd say this is more like something that should have the Janus Films thing on it or whatever. Are they still around? I don't think so. But if this was presented as Roma, this great foreign film that won an award, you'd be walking into it from a different perspective, whereas you're like, oh, this is Alfonso Cuarón. I've seen all these very popular movies with movie stars in them, and I know how they're made in a certain way. And Roma is not made in that way. And I think that is what more of that is. I do think with dealing with Cuarón's auteurism, you're almost overpowered more by it than you are kind of like taken away from it, and that's just his way of filmmaking. I like that his way of filmmaking. I've never really watched them all in a row. I'm a little curious now after watching this. This makes me think of more of him as a director. Not that anytime he has a film, I'm flooded with the ideas of his films, and I think this one has that. But I will say, yes, maybe the star of this is really Alfonso Cuarón. It's such a beautiful, kind of amazing film and amazing story to watch his star power through. In a way, that's the whole package, isn't it? Is his technique, is the way he presented this. And you kind of go along with that, and I'd much rather go along with that than kind of complain about how his technique is almost better than the story. Sure, the story is maybe simplistic and maybe, you know, a smaller Mexican film drama that none of us would have ever seen or heard about to this level could tackle this subject matter as well. But the main thing with filmmaking, I know I've said this a million times, but it's not what the story is, it's how it is about it. And how it is about it is Alfonso Cuarón. And I'm kind of amazed at seeing a film through that lens. I mean, literally, because he shot it. Which is interesting. This is one of his few films not shot by Emmanuel Lubezki, and it kind of calls to mind how good Cuarón is with a camera. And I've often said that how good of a cinematographer they are, it's almost how the director knows how to use them. And in this, it calls to mind how visual Cuarón is. This almost pushes him to a level where you understand that, like, Emmanuel Lubezki has a certain kind of way he shoots a film when he's shooting a film with Cuarón versus when he shoots a film with, like, let's say Terrence Malick or Inarritu. You can tell a different guys through that, and you can still tell the hallmarks of a Cuarón film through this, which kind of speaks to mind that how smartly visual Alfonso Cuarón is. And I think this film shows how well he understands to use those visuals, because you get kind of the background, the idea, the smell of Mexico in the 70s. And I think because Roma is so good at that and flooding you with those images, you feel like you're there, you feel like you understand this world, and you feel almost observing both the time, the place, the setting, as much as you're understanding the story. And that is the whole package, the way he's presenting it to you. And I think the way he's presenting it to you is the beauty and the essence and the wonderfulness of a film like Roma. So if you have seen Roma and you would like to talk about it, then comment below in the comments and subscribe if you would like to.